Welcome to the Unobstructed podcast, the podcast that breaks the division between business and culture. And now, your hosts, Colin, Finkle and Edward Cervantes.
I'm going to go right into it and ask you, how'd you like the entire Raptors run postseason?
Well,
Did you follow it from start to finish or no?
So I followed it in as much as like people were getting hyped up about it, and I asked people who were into it about the game. My son Colin has a father who was like really into basketball, so I was sort of living by proxy. But then when they hit I think they won game one, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is more than a little bit of a chance. And so I watched the stream. I streamed all the games legally.
Yeah, of course. Yep.
Yeah, of course. I streamed all the games after that, and then I got really hyped up. But I don't know. What was your experience? How did you? What was your with the Raptors win?
I don't know, man. I'm a huge Raptors fan. I've been a huge Raptors fan since the late '90s, early 2000s when they kind of came into fruition. Honestly, I never thought they had a chance. Not to bet against my own team, but I honestly wasn't convinced that they were going to be able to really do it up until they took down Milwaukee, which was obviously in the Eastern Conference Finals. But leading up to that, I wasn't really convinced in their style of play when they were facing Orlando, and then they took Philly in Game 7, and then struggled the first two games in Milwaukee. I was like, man, we're getting by, but we're barely getting by. And Kawhi Leonard was the one doing it all. We got no support from the bench, and we were living off a guy who was averaging 35 points a game or something like that. But then after when I saw it, to your point, when we saw it take Game 1, Golden State, I was like, oh my God, we actually have a chance. And kind of everything worked out in their favor with KD getting injured, which was a huge loss for them. And it was funny because the more progressively they got into the postseason, or the deeper they got into the postseason, the more and more the fan base started getting into it. Because we've been here before, like we were already at the Eastern Conference Finals against Cleveland. I think it was 2015, 2016. So it's like, we already been here. Call me when it's real.
Yeah.
Then they beat Milwaukee, and then everyone starts tuning in. And it's like, oh, it's legit. We actually have a chance now.
Yeah. I think it was colored by the Jays run 3 or 4 years ago, where we got to the conference finals, but I couldn't bring it home. And I think everybody was sort of like call me when it's legit, because they didn't want to get hyped up. Because I don't know, maybe every city feels like this, but we sort of are long-suffering fans in Toronto. In every sport, even though we have well, let's say reasonable teams in every sport, but yeah, we haven't won anything since the 92-93 Jays win.
Yep. And
the assumption is that we're like killing it in hockey, but if you are from Toronto, then everybody knows that our hockey team is absolute garbage, yet they sell their arena out every night, so there's no motivation to make them good.
Yep.
So yeah, but anyway, what was interesting to me is that it really became a national phenomenon.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about this. I was like, no matter how, like obviously LA, New York, like these are huge districts, but since the Vancouver Grizzlies went out or moved, and it's just Canada's team. It really is Canada's team. They might as well call it the Canada Raptors. I don't know. What your thoughts?
The Canadian Raptors. No, and I 100% agree. That's why I'm in love with the whole We the North campaign, because it stems from a lot more than just Toronto Raptors, even though obviously the campaign was designated and designed for that team. But you think of every Toronto sports fan, doesn't matter what team you're voting for, hockey, basketball, baseball. I think every Toronto sports fan is ingrained in every team to some degree, that they're all in on it. Doesn't even matter the history around it, So you think of fans that, from the early 2000s when Vince Carter was here, back when the Leafs were decent around the early 2000s, they had Matt Sundin, Alexander McGillney.
Mm-hmm.
You think of when they had Carlos Delgado back in the Jays.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of my generation growing up. So I was around like 9, 10 years old around that time. And I remember watching all those sports teams with my parents and my dad. My dad was a huge sports fan, huge baseball fan. And then there was this dark area where literally Toronto sports teams sucked.
Yeah. Right. So sort of like, I guess the entire 2000s to I don't know, mid-teens in the like 2010, 2013, sort of around that started to turn.
Exactly. And that all started with Toronto Raptors. Toronto Raptors make the playoffs when they weren't supposed to that year. They made some trades. They were aiming to kind of flunk out the year and take their chances in the lottery, but they ended up making the playoffs and like, okay, wait, there's something working here. So like that whole We the North campaign is phenomenal in my opinion, because it stems to every sports fan,
Yeah.
And I mean, when you think of how large our market is here up north in every sport, it's kind of hard. Like, I don't know, Canada has our ratio to the U.S. is like what, 10-1 in our population.
Yeah.
Have like 300 million, we have like 30 or something like that.
Yeah.
So you think about, for every one fan that we can get, it's just they're way too involved and ingrained, and they saw it. You know what I mean? Especially now, people my age now who were 10, 11 years old at that time, they grew up into this.
Yeah, 37 million is Canada. So yeah, it's like a little 1 to 10. What is the ratio? So a little bit of history on the We the North campaign. It was the marketing firm Sid Lee and their Toronto office. Apparently, they're quite a humongous marketing firm, and
huge.
It's revision. It was part of their rebranding of the Toronto Raptors. What year was it was the Raptors' 25th anniversary.
I think it might have been the 2012, 2013.
Yeah. So they went from the purple, red, black, white sort of color scheme to strictly red, black, and white. And it was like I said, the Vancouver lost their basketball team, so it was literally the only team in Canada.
Yep.
So taking the national colors of Canada was a big deal. But what I found interesting, I was looking into this, is that We the North was just sort of a slide in their deck, and they had made some shirts up with it, and like it wasn't something, they didn't think it was going to be what it ended up becoming to be. I don't know.
Definitely not.
Let me know if you agree with this statement. I think, like, if that We the North campaign didn't exist, do you think that they would have gone as far as they did?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not. I mean, yeah, I honestly, I can't see it any other way, because the reality is that We the North campaign, when you go back to branding, you think of branding, you think of a cultural story, you think of something that you can associate with. And at the time that it came out, unless you were following the Raptors, no one really understood what that meant in the grand scheme of things from a global marketing standpoint. No one understood what it meant to be We the North. Yeah. And I remember, like, you can think of whenever anybody talked about sports, no one wanted to mention, oh, I'm a Toronto sports fan. They would say, oh yeah, I'm following the LA Kings, I'm following the Lakers, I'm following, so and so. And you would come across this all the time whenever I travel to the US, and you talk about sports. You were kind of hesitant to say, yeah, I'm Canadian. You're like, oh yeah, I'm just further up north. Well, what do you follow? Oh, I follow the New York Knicks or something like that. You never wanted to say you're from Toronto, because that differentiation was like, oh, you're one of them, you suck, kind of thing. So it was like, oh no, I don't want to be a part of the sucking team. But then it's like they flipped it around with the whole campaign. It's like, you know what, we are different. We are truly in isolation from the rest of the entire market. But that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Well, I think that was what they created was like sort of a true brand identity where like there's actually an identity behind it. They said that, okay, this is the market defined by this border, defined by sort of these underdog values. It was really taking it to saying something that Canadian sports fans had already acknowledged for a while, whereas it is a different approach. And I was going to say, like, yeah, you're right. A lot of people in Canada adopt U.S. sports teams just out of sheer, I want to have a team that at least makes the playoffs like 2/3 of the time, or
exactly
has a title run.
Yeah.
And then the We the North was sort of flipping that, where like stop exporting your pride onto like the Pittsburgh Penguins or the LA Kings or whatever, or even the Golden State Warriors, because I think a lot of people, because they played basketball so differently, even though like obviously we're not from Oakland, I think most of their fans are probably, I would venture to say, not from Oakland or San Francisco, but are attracted that they're that sort of different style of team.
Yeah, they definitely changed the game of basketball.
Yeah, so I was watching a interview with one of the executives from Sid Lee Toronto that was around when they were pitching their branding thing, and they ultimately got selected, and he was saying that he didn't realize that slogan had the power that it did until he saw that somebody walked into a convenience store with him and they had We the North like custom stitched into a baseball cap, because the Raptors, like the franchise, didn't sell We the North baseball caps at the time. So it was sort of, I think as marketers, they probably would like to say that, oh, we knew it was that was the one from the very beginning.
Yeah.
But I think they were as surprised as anybody that it captured something that people have been feeling.
For sure. No, and that's the chance when it comes to marketing. You can research the demographic, try and understand with them, associate yourselves with them. But at the end of the day, you never really know the impact that's going to take beyond the branding and marketing level, because this wasn't even. This was beyond marketing. This was like a social movement that stemmed from the moment the Raptors started their season this year. And it grew and grew, and it grew ginormously right after they started, going deep into the playoffs. So it wasn't even just a marketing campaign, but more like a great social movement that kind of got everybody associated with it, because they started to see, wow, we actually have a chance as Canadians in the Canadian market. We can actually now dominate one of the four major sports that we have here.
Yeah, so I was driving on the highway yesterday and I saw a truck that had like a We the North and a Go Raptors Go sticker, and it was a medical supply company. I was like, I don't think that you're the title sponsor for the number one medical supply company of the Toronto Raptors. But yeah, it was sort of a general movement. I think also it's interesting to talk about too, because I think in the past maybe people would come up with a campaign in a boardroom and then make the art and schedule all the media buys like a year in advance, and then have a 5-year plan, and then maybe they'd get a sales report back and like whatever. But now I think it's changed where you really don't. We have to acknowledge that we don't know what's going to take people in the market, what's going to speak to people in the market. And now it has to be more of a constant feedback loop, like where, like that guy in the convenience store that saw the We the North hat, it's like, okay, I can see this is something that's resonating. I'm going to double down on that aspect of the campaign and sort of constantly be iterating and reactive to the signals that you're getting, whether it be from like social media or market research or whatnot.
Yeah, no, it is entirely true, and I think that was a good move from Toronto Raptors to bring in Drake, right? Because he already had a fantastic market, he already had a great following, And I think everyone can agree that a majority of his following is from Toronto, obviously, and they resonate with him and they associate themselves with him. They're like, he is Toronto. He reminds me of Toronto. He reminds me of what our entire generation went through. And yeah, that constant loop. It was like that trifecta relationship happening between Drake, between the people, the fan base, and Toronto Raptors and Toronto sports teams in general. And it was just this constant loop that, and he reiterated in his music and his lyrics, and everyone started to take pride in being from the North, are from the North. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's a good brand fit because much like Canada isn't sort of allowed to have a good basketball team, we're not allowed to export good rappers either.
Yeah.
So
No.
it was the same. It was the same thing where it's like, okay, you have this R&B. I don't know. What genre would you say Drake is? Like, so I'm like, it's hard to call him a rapper, but
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that you'd call him a lyricist, really, but I think any genre of music, he has the talent and the capabilities of performing it. So.
Yeah. So I'd be curious at like what the deal, because he's named as a global brand ambassador for the Raptors.
Yep.
And I'm sure that there is some sort of compensation and
Absolutely.
agreements and number of social shout outs. But I'm curious at what the arrangement would look like because it seemed so genuine. Like it really seemed like he was the number one fan and cheerleader. Like there was no like there. I think we can all have a sense of when they sign up big social media stars or musicians or actors or something or as brand ambassadors, and they sort of show up for the TV spots, like do the shout outs, but there's no genuineness to it. But this one, it seems like he'd be talking about the Raptors even if that relationship hadn't been formalized.
Yeah, no, and I 100% agree. I mean, I obviously it's easy to say it now and it's already done, but I can't really think of anyone else that really resembles the North or that whole We the North as good as he does. I can't really think of anyone else that's Canadian that can really push the entire Toronto sports brand market to the top like he did. Yeah, and I agree when OVO and the Toronto Raptors teamed up, it was almost like, wow, this is perfect. He was able to get everything he wanted in terms of extending his brand, further assimilating himself into the market. And Toronto was able to kind of piggyback off of Drake's fan base, which is already Toronto-based. It's already Canadian. Their fan base is already from the same market that we're trying to capture. We're just trying to direct them to the Toronto Raptors. So both of them together, I think, was inevitable, but I think it was a fantastic relationship, and it still is.
Yeah. So do you know much about the OVO thing? Like I was in doing the research for this podcast. Like I saw that they did a crossover jersey with the Raptors. But is OVO his personal brand or line?
So OVO stands for October's very own. He was born in October, I believe. So that's his brand, and the owl is his kind of his logo. Okay. He owns that, and if you've ever been to an OVO Fest, any Toronto fan would know, he sells OVO branded clothing, OVO branded shirts, OVO branded hats. His whole color scheme is gold and black, or gold and white. It's truly gold, really, whatever that hint of gold is, and I think that is what really transitioned well into our Toronto sports brand, because we have the red jerseys, we got the black and gold OVO jerseys, white and gold OVO jerseys. But yeah, that is his brand, and that was already established for a while. So it's not new. That OVO brand and the owl logo was kind of existing for many, many years. And then you have the Toronto sports logo and sports team and We the North campaign, and it was just like eventually they were going to cross roads. Like it was inevitable.
Yeah. And it's similar typography in the campaign as the OVO stuff. Very minimal style.
Yeah.
Those jerseys with the just the North stuff on it is like I don't know, they look super wicked. They're like, I'm a huge fan. Actually, I'm a huge fan of all of the design that has gone into all of the We the North stuff. Really speaking to that, it's being really simple, being really deterministic, very thoughtful about all the imagery that you're using, and then using the same imagery over and over and over again to reinforce that stuff. So
yeah, no, I 100% agree. And then to add further to the success of this entire postseason from marketing and branding perspective, then you have the branding associated with Kawhi Leonard. So I'm not too sure if you heard about Kawhi Leonard, but he left the Jordan brand earlier in the year and signed with New Balance, which I thought was hilarious.
Yeah, because New Balance is really not associated with
basketball.
Sport.
Really.
Basketball.
Yeah, I mean, in sports in general, New Balance has been a brand that's existed for many, many years. And, when you think of New Balance or Nike, I'm thinking Nike as being the forefront of revolutionizing sports, right? They're thinking of new technologies. They're thinking of new ways to revolutionize something that's so simplistic in what it is, from your shoes to your hats to your T-shirts. But New Balance is that, when I think of New Balance, I think of that 9-to-5 guy that just comes into work, shows up, does what he's supposed to do, exceeds expectations, and clocks out at 5. He doesn't do anything more.
Exactly.
You think of Nike. You think of Nike coming in at 9, working his ass off, not necessarily clocking out at 5, but spending the extra couple hours to try and find out a way to make the week easier and kind of putting in that extra work. Where I don't see that from New Balance, and that's not a shot at it in any way. I just think of New Balance being that classic 9-to-5 grinder that just comes in, does his work, leaves.
Yeah. Nike has some real credibility in athletics, like beyond just all the branding campaigns and that sort of stuff, and associating themselves with athletes. I can't remember the name of the designer, but I'll put it up on the screen if we post this later. The designer, the main designer that did all of the Jordan shoes, was a kinesiologist or head coach from a university who was trying to help out sprinters get like the absolute last drop of their performance out. And I think he was also trying to help sprinters who had like issues with pining and that sort of thing, where just the sort of structure and geometry of their feet was keeping them from performance. And so there's as glitzy as Nike can be, like it comes from a really genuine place. Whereas you're right. I think New Balance, I don't have the same level of knowledge that I do with Nike, but it was always perceived as sort of a mall brand. There's a movie with Steve Carell and what's that actor who's from Canada? That everybody, like a heartthrob that everybody likes. He was in The Notebook.
Ryan Gosling.
There's a movie where Ryan Gosling is trying to teach Steve Carell how to get women, because he's gotten divorced, or Steve Carell has gotten divorced and is going back into the dating scene. And the first thing he does is get him to throw away his New Balance shoes. And I think of in a weird way that sort of sums up the New Balance brand. So anyway, big risk for Kawhi Leonard to drop Nike and go for New Balance. And huge risk for him to come to Toronto too. He wanted to be on a winning team, and that was a risk as well. So,
but when you think of Nike, you think of the Jordan brand. I'll be honest, I don't think of Kawhi Leonard. I think of players like Russell Westbrook, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, guys that have flair to their game, guys that know how to flaunt it. They're a little cocky, or a little arrogant, not necessarily confident. Where you have a guy like Kawhi Leonard, who I think is like the picture perfect individual for New Balance, because he doesn't say a word. He's not arrogant. He's definitely confident, but he'll never flaunt it.
Yeah.
But he's the kind of guy that'll come in, put his work 9 to 5, and that's it. Job's done, goes home. And I think that whole relationship was so well in the postseason, obviously throughout the entire year, and every single time Kawhi even said something that was remotely funny, or not even try to be funny, but just said something that was like, oh my god, it's very un-Kawhi like. New Balance would take advantage of it. The shirts that they had that said "fun guy" on it. No one understands it unless you know Kawhi Leonard and you know Toronto. Everyone looks at it and goes, I get it. The reality is he doesn't portray himself to be a fun guy to the media. Honestly, I didn't know. If you don't see the videos on social media that show his personality outside of basketball, you would think that he is a very boring person. I'd be honest with you. I would not want to have dinner with him because I think that it'd be me talking versus him just, not saying a word, maybe nodding, maybe a grin, but he won't say a single thing. And then you think of, he constantly says, I'm a fun guy. No one believes he's a fun guy.
Then
you see all these videos of him celebrating and showing his true emotion. Like he waited all postseason for that moment, showed his emotion, and then New Balance comes out with the fun guy t-shirt and actually crashes their website. I don't know if you heard of that, but I
didn't hear that.
Hilarious. Yeah, they as soon as they put the sale on for the Fun Guy T-shirt, which is just a simple T-shirt that says the New Balance logo followed by Fun Guy. Apparently, they were having so many people on their servers that their website actually crashed. They couldn't even meet the demand for the shirts. And I guarantee you that all the people that were on there were Toronto-based fans, right?
Yeah. Well, again, that speaks to that whole thing where you can't just prescribe all of this stuff. You have to be reactive, and you have to listen to the fans and get some feedback. Like,
exactly.
I'm sure that came out of somebody being really in touch. I want to say social media with social media stuff, but I think social media can kind of get distortive. Like just being a part of the movement and the fans and the culture around that. And it's so much more powerful. Clearly, like I'm guessing that they haven't had a pair of sneakers in a while that has crashed their website. But having something that's so genuine and so from a place that people are feeling gives them that impact.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And yeah, that's exactly that goes back to that relationship that it's constantly feedback between the demographic, target audience, and the marketers, the branding. And take advantage of that. And social media obviously is the best foreground foundation where you can just go in there and have that middle relationship because that's the best way to receive all the information that's coming in. But being reactive is very, very important. And New Balance did such a good job taking advantage of that, taking advantage of his postseason run, put the branding out there. And now, they have an MVP finalist all-star athlete to their name. And their brand has grown. And honestly, I like their shoes. I like what they did this year. They added some flair to their brand. I like it a lot.
Yeah, no, I think it's hard to understate how seismic like something like this can be for a brand like New Balance. Like it can really, really change their entire brand perception, brand identity, and make a huge impact on sales. Like I don't know when you get so you can like negotiate a distribution agreement or have like a social media campaign and then just like cross your fingers that it's gonna have like a 6% lift on sales. Like this is gonna be a huge like momentum shift for them versus Nike. Nike also got crapped on. Did you see that story about the college athlete whose Nikes like tore off to the side? In a game.
Yeah, that's Zion Williamson. He actually just got drafted number 1 the other day to the New Orleans Pelicans. But I was actually about to touch on that as well. He has the very Michael Jordan-esque popularity going in, and I use that, very subtle. I don't want people to think that I'm comparing him to Michael Jordan, but he had so much media building up from when he was in high school up until he got drafted yesterday or a couple of days ago. Sorry, and the fact that he was being watched and looked on and literally under a microscope. Then you start examining every single piece of thing that goes along with him. And his shoes, when they blew out that day, Nike was getting ripped on. I remember that vividly.
Yeah, undeservedly so. Because what I heard was that there was some limited run of sneaker that wasn't meant for like a professional athlete to be using day in and day out. I think and so like when when it blew out, Nike like explained all of this, but of course the meme of it is that Nike shoes are not like reliable in an athletic environment, which is runs count. And the reason it's such a powerful meme is because it runs exactly counter to their brand identity, where these things are the absolute best thing for athletics. So yeah, it's tough. We'll see. I did some research for a client a few weeks back about the athleisure market, where people are wearing athletic wear just like for day-to-day use.
That's grown up quite a bit over the last few years.
Yeah, just a little bit. And Nike absolutely dominates. If you look up search quantity, Nike is like 3 times more searches just for like direct people going to Google and just typing Nike. There's 3 times more people that search Nike than their closest competitor. So so I don't know. People are like, it seems like New Balance and people are like sort of throwing rocks up at the throne there.
Well, yeah, it takes a little bit to gain and own the market a little bit, but yeah, no, that athleisure market, and that's a great way to put it. Yeah, it's definitely grown quite a bit, and obviously that's kind of stems to now they're not necessarily creating running shoes or training shoes, but they're creating these leisure shoes that look like a typical Nike free runs, but they're not meant to be running in. They're just meant to be trending with the jogging pants or capris or however people dress them like. And then they have these athletic shirts, not necessarily t-shirts, not necessarily polyester based material to go to the gym, but they're just, for comfort. And it's quite a bit. Yeah, no, I definitely see that.
Okay, cool. Well, sorry, I gotta wrap this up on my time. Anything interesting that you're looking forward to in the coming? Any movies that are coming out that you're interested in?
Well, we're gonna definitely have to watch Spider-Man. That's for sure.
Yes.
That's a minimum, and then I'm gonna have to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's another one.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, movies have grown quite a bit. Dark Phoenix, I wasn't a huge fan of. Not gonna lie. X-Men. It could be me going in there with a terrible mindset, given that they haven't been able to exceed my expectations ever. So maybe it's me just being a little rude and a little mean, but I don't know. I was really disappointed with that, considering all the X-Men, the Marvel characters are so historical. You can't put them to waste like that. What about you?
Well, I got some interesting work coming up. Working on new packaging for like a brand new line of food for the Canadian market, so that should be fun.
Nice.
Forward to that. I'm like a week behind on a blog post about brand promise, which is really good. It's just basically talking about how a brand is nothing if it's not promising to deliver something. Like we were talking about Nike, like that promise to deliver the absolute best thing for athletics, and trying to explain that concept to people. I reference it a lot in other blog posts. So I'm like, oh crap, how have I not talked about this? I'm looking forward.
Writing starts.
Looking forward to Spider-Man. I really enjoyed Homecoming. I thought that was the first real
authentic
take on Spider-Man, and he's actually
I agree.
He's actually young, which is important. Like, I don't know why they always portray him as like this college age and later, when he's really the kid's superhero.
He's really a kid. Yeah, it's true.
So and weather's continuing to get better here in Toronto, so we're gonna enjoy that too.
Yep, I don't blame you. I'm obviously way too busy going on. The more Doug Ford keeps making changes in office, the more occupado I become. So
yeah, you get blitzed by these weird, it's what seem like, from my perspective, sort of ad lib policies. I'm sure that you're you guys are thrown into a lot of work.
A lot of random work that doesn't make any sense to the public. But when you run the numbers, like I see some sense in there, but it's not going well. It's not really publicly accepted, so it's a challenge.
Okay, cool. Okay, well we'll check in with you next week and talk about something else.
For sure. All right, man. Talk to you.
Thank you for listening to the Unobstructed podcast. Links to the stories we talked about can be found at unobstructedpodcast.com. If you are not subscribed, please consider subscribing. If you are a regular listener, a 5-star review would help us find new listeners. Until next time, keep breaking boundaries.